Good day everyone, I'm Epiphany Mary Hakosalam, and in today's video, I'm gonna tackle about the ethnocentrism and relativism. So please keep on watching. Ethnocentrism and relativism. Ethnocentrism is judging another culture solely by the values and standards of one's own culture. This means to apply one's own culture or ethnicity as a frame of reference to judge other cultures, practices, behaviors, beliefs, and people. So instead of using the standards of the particular culture involved, let's move to the next slide. Ethnocentric. These ethnocentric individuals judge other groups relative to their own ethnic group or culture, especially with concern for language, behavior, customs, and religion. So these ethnic distinctions and subdivisions serve to define each culture ethnicity's unique cultural identity. Next slide. According to William G. Sumner, ethnocentrism is defined as the technical name for the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything, and all others are scaled and rated with reference to it. So he also further characterized it as often leading to pride, vanity, belief of one's own group superiority, and contempt of outsiders. He advanced that the central theorem concerning the concept. So in its simplest terms, he held that ethnocentrism, defined broadly as extreme attachment to the in-group, led to the out-group hate. Let's move on. So in the study of anthropology, ethnocentric are people born into a particular culture that grow up absorbing the values and behaviors of the culture, will develop a worldview that considers their culture to be the norm, like standard, so that it means the person considers his ethnicity as naturally superior to all others. So if people then experience other cultures that have different values and normal behaviors, they will find that the thought patterns appropriate to their birth culture are not appropriate for their new culture. So it is like not accepted. So each and one of us have different values in life and other behaviors, maybe because of ethnocentric. So next slide. However, since people are accustomed to their birth culture, it can be difficult for them to see the behaviors of people from a different culture from the viewpoint of the culture rather than from their own. Next slide. Examples of ethnocentrism include religious-centric construct claiming a divine association like divine nation. So in this religious-centric, in these terms, means religious sentiments based on exclusivity of belief that the fulfillment of one's interests should be based on teachings like one nation under God, God's own country, God's chosen people, and God's promised lands. So those are religious centrism. And it is also defined by Corsini, 1999. So in her study, we all know that the conviction that a person's own religion is more important or superior to other religions. So in analogy to ethnocentrism, religious centrism is a value-neutral term for psychological attitude. In the next slide, we will talk about the cultural relativism. So in this principle, that an individual person believes and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. So why is that? Because this is using the perspective of cultural relativism leads to the view that no one culture is superior than another culture when compared to systems of morality, law, politics, etc. And this concept that cultural norms and values derive their meaning within a specific social context. Next slide. So it was established as accepted in anthropological research by Franz Boas in the first few decades of the 20th century and later popularized by his student. So cultural relativism wasn't a part of response to Western ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism may take obvious forms in which one consciously believes that one's people's arts are the most beautiful, values the most virtuous, and believes the most truthful. So example of cultural relativism might include slang words from specific language. So even from the particular dialects within a language. For instance, the word tranquillo in Spanish, it is directly to calm in English. However, it cannot be used in many more ways than just an adjective. Like for examples, the seas are calm. So tranquillo can be command or suggestion. So encouraging another to calm down. It can also be used to ease tensions in an argument, like for example, relax, so or to indicate a degree of self-composure. Another example is I'm calm. So there is not a clear English translation of the word. So and in order to fully comprehend its many possible uses. So a cultural relativist would argue that it would not be necessary to fully immerse oneself in cultures where the word is used. So let me give you an example for the food choices. Diba? It is part of cultural relativism because people have become more tolerant of food from cultures that are not their own. So, in the past, people were more likely to find some types of foods unacceptable, but now they are more likely to not judge others based on their food choices. That is the basic example for that. Next slide. So Boas first articulated in the idea 1887. So civilization is not something absolute, but is relative, and our ideas and conceptions are true only so far as our civilization goes. However, Boas did not coin the term. Franz Boas, originally trained in physics and geography, argued that one's culture may mediate and thus limit one's perceptions in less obvious ways. He understood culture to include not only certain tastes in food, art, and music, or beliefs about religion. He assumed a much broader notion of culture defined as. So, let me summarize first this approach known as cultural relativism. So, cultural relativism again is the principle that an individual's person beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. So a key component of cultural relativism is the concept that nobody, not even researchers, comes from a neutral position. So the way to deal with our own assumptions is not to pretend that they don't exist, but rather to acknowledge them and then use the awareness that we are not neutral to inform our conclusion. So the totality of the mental and physical reactions and activities that characterize the behavior of the individuals composing a social group collectively and individually in relation to their natural environment, to other groups, to members of the group itself, and of each individual to himself. For the next slide is the understanding of culture confronts anthropologists with two problems. First, how to escape the unconscious bands of one's own culture, which inevitably bias our perceptions of and reaction to the world. So, our unconscious bias can affect how we perceive the world around us. So, We must read about our 4 common biases and how they modify our perception. So, while this unconscious bias may seem innocent, problems can arise when unconscious biases make their way into workplace. And second, how to make sense of an unfamiliar culture. Generalization. Ethnocentrism, the tendency to assume that one's own culture and way of life represent the norm or are superior to all others. Cultural relativism, the viewing of people's behavior from the perspective of their own culture. In this key points of this topic, we all know that ethnocentrism again is often entails the belief that one's own race or ethnic group is the most important, or that some or all aspects of its cultures are superior to those of other groups. So within this ideology, individuals will judge other groups in relation to their own particular ethnic group or culture, especially with concern to language, behavior, customs, and religion. And the next one is cultural relativism. It is the belief that the concepts and values of a culture cannot be fully translated into or fully understood in other languages. So that a specific cultural artifact, example, a ritual, has to be understood in terms of the larger symbolic system of which it is a part. And next is the principle that an individual's persons, beliefs, and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. And that is all for today's topic, and that is all for ethnocentrism and relativism. Thank you and goodbye.